All right, what is up, everybody? Zombies here again. Today we are back with episode 12 of The Fighting Pit. As always, I am joined by my two co-hosts, Mullahoo and WizardBeast. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great today. Heard a lot of news right before this podcast about Mercenaries, and can't wait to just dive into it. I'm really excited about today.
Yeah, these last weeks have been sweet, and yeah, even more sweet news today. Cohen Concede having the spicy Ben Lee interview, so we'll talk about that probably later on in the show, I think. But the meta itself has been awesome, so yeah, I'm excited to talk about Merc stuff.
Yeah, this is definitely, we're gonna be doing a deeper dive into the meta this time. Last time talked about it a little bit, but it was still very much in the kind of early stages. People just got up, the new Mercs to PvP playable, or some people max. And so we didn't really know, we didn't have a great grasp on what the new comps were or how powerful they were. Obviously the old stuff from 2 drops ago is still good, Frostvalir is still good, but how good does, the new stuff stack up? Are there more kind of like fringe builds and all that? So we're going to get into that. That's going to be one of our main topics of discussion. But we do have a little bit of like short news stuff wanted to cover before we get into that. If you do not know, the Chi-Ji event does end on March 8th. I think that means the 8th is the last day you can do it. So March 9th rolls around, Chi-Ji event is gone. So if you want to get that done, you only have a few days left for that. So do be aware of that. I think we all had some pretty positive things to say about it overall. It was pretty fun having a different kind of challenge to go through the game and revisit some of the older bounties in new ways. So if you haven't checked that out yet, definitely recommend giving it a shot. And even if you're more of a budget player, Old Guardian's got you covered with some really great guides all the way from non-budget to full budget for pretty much all that stuff. So definitely go show him some love if you're looking for those PvE guides, because he is the PvE master. No one does it quite as in depth as him, and I think we all really appreciate that. And with the event, with the Chi-Ji event ending, we will be getting new bounties. So the last two bounties of Alderac Valley are Vandar Stormpike and Kazakis, and those are going to be, I believe they're dropping like right after the event ends, so I think on the 9th they will open up. I don't know if that's been 100% confirmed, but I think it was mentioned somewhere. So I know a lot of people have wanted those, and if you want Chi-Ji's, last and arguably best item, got to do the heroic Kazakis, I believe. So that's exciting. I think that's been limiting Chi-Ji a little bit, and we'll talk about that in the meta section here, because I know WizardBeast has been playing a lot with Chi-Ji. So we're excited for that. Obviously, also a new Hearthstone year is coming soon, TM. Usually, if the past is any indicator, we usually get an announcement between late February and the first or second week of March. Well, at the time of recording this, it's March 3rd, so probably going to be seeing an announcement about what the new year in Hearthstone is going to entail in the next week or two, and hopefully we will get some more Mercenaries info along with that. Kind of would make sense because we've been getting most of our Mercs info from patch notes and stuff like that. So I think it would make sense that we'll at least get some kind of information about what we can expect in the new year for Mercenaries. And then the last tiny bit of news, Yu'lon got a little bit of a buff. So there was a small balance adjustment patch, adjusted Kazakis and standard, some BG stuff. And right at the bottom, there was like a tiny little thing, and it was like, hey, Yu'lon's skill 3, which is his taunt and nature damage skill, that one went from being an arcane skill to a nature skill. And, sounds kind of small, but it's actually kind of significant, especially when you consider, you can speed it up with Malfurion now, and you can also heal off Malf with it. So not the biggest thing, but definitely a buff for Yu'lon, who was already a much, much better character than I think all of us expected. So that was really cool. So why don't we just get right on into it with the meta stuff? I definitely want to hear about what you guys have been playing. I know, WizardBeast, you've been doing a lot of Chi-Ji experimenting. So do you want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I've been playing tons of GG. I think I've probably played over 100 games total of GG now.
Yeesh.
Wow.
Yeah, I've done probably two, I would say two comps have worked out decent, which is a Frost opener with like a GG backline, but right now with the new Dragon comp, that just gets destroyed.
Mhm.
So I haven't been playing that one. The main comp though I have been playing with, and actually I've been going about a 60% win rate currently, is a Malfurion Chi opener, and then you can do it with either Mukla or Anacondra. You
Mhm.
can decide between those two of which one to put in, depending on what colors you see from your opponent. And then for bench, I do Cookie and Sinestra always. Just always great to have the extra life from Cookie, and then Sinestra is just a great, amazing mercenary to have on the bench who can 1v2 most of the time. So overall, it's been doing pretty well against any slow comps or like mid-range.
Mhm.
It's more of definitely a control like combo type of deck that I've been working on. And surprisingly, today I actually played 6 games against dragons and I won 5 of them.
Wow.
Oh, that's
So
legit.
yeah, it's actually been turning out really well with it. And this is even without the good GG equipment.
Yeah.
So once that comes in with the extra damage and especially the extra healing power, so an extra 2 every time, I think this will definitely be a way stronger deck. But against dragons, I've been doing some openers I do with Anacondra because a lot of people haven't played against this comp, so sometimes they'll focus the Malfurion, which then you don't have to worry about it because you can save your Malfurion and your Chi-Ji then starts ramping up the healing. And basically what you do is you can actually outlive their damage. So you play it slow and just slowly keep healing up and increasing your healing power until you can literally one-shot like 2 of their dragons in one turn with just all of the burst damage from Chi-Ji. So
Wow.
it's been amazing. Today I even had a game that I thought I was gonna completely lose. Um, I was playing it same comp, and I was down to my last 2 mercs, which was Chi-Ji and Sinestra, and they still had all of their dragons on the board and their nature backline, and I ended up winning with just Sinestra Chi-Ji
Wow.
all the way 2v6,
That's
just because
crazy.
Sinestra's Twilight, because it had so much healing power, was healing for 80 itself.
Oh my god.
So Sinestro was full healing every turn. Chi-Ji was doing a massive heal and a huge AoE every other turn. So I was
That's
just going
crazy.
heal AoE with her. So it was
Hmm.
just amazing to actually finally be able to start pulling off some of these things as more as I'm not seeing as much Frost of Lyra, which was the main thing that would be shutting this down. So the deck's actually been really coming up recently, and I think with the equipment coming out next week, that I think it actually has a chance to be not a top end deck for sure, but definitely up there where it could have a good win rate.
Yeah, and I think a big thing right now is uh, I think there are a lot of decks that might not have the greatest Frost Valyra matchup, but that doesn't like default make them a bad deck. Like it
Mhm.
can feel that way for sure when you're running into the same Frost Valyra player 2 or 3 times in a row. It makes you want to see cold snap and close the game.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about it is there are other comps that can beat that, and I find a lot of these newer comps have game against those other comps, right? So it's kind of like that rock paper scissors type thing. I don't think it's that harshly defined, but like some of these newer comps do have game against either other new comps or some of the older comps that are still sticking around. So it's interesting to see for sure. Like, I think the meta's actually been rather interesting. I know, obviously, the Frost Valyra stuff can be frustrating. Anytime, you're denying actions that heavily, it can be pretty annoying. It's like a cookie snipe on steroids, right? Like, it just can swing the game so hard. But, we've seen things come up to kind of counter that in a way, like Rag, Cornelius, just different things to either shut down the freezing or kind of block the elemental. I know we were doing some testing on Mullahoo's stream today. He kind of came up with he had you had this Frost Tyrion build, right? You've been playing recently, and that's been doing really well for you, right? Like that you got up to like what, like top 5 the other day or something crazy.
Yeah, we peaked rank 5, I think, yesterday. We fell down a little bit, but yeah, I mean, we were sitting like top 20, basically exclusively playing this Localar Tyrion Varden opener that has a Karen Diablo Sky Admiral Rogers bench. But yeah, the deck's honestly been really good and kind of, I mean, so I played against WizardBeast a couple days ago with his Chi deck and it got absolutely murdered. But I think it does kind of, like he was saying, like you were saying, there is a degree of a kind of rock, paper, scissors thing right now but with more than just 3 decks, thankfully, but there's more or less like dragons, these mid-rangey decks, these aggro-y decks, but like you said, we were trying to figure out like what the heck can beat dragons, because my deck is literally 0% capable to beat dragons. It's the worst matchup by an enormous margin. So we were sitting there like, how do we beat dragons? Because as far looking on the outside looking in and not being a dragons player myself, it just seemed like the deck was great. It's kind of a de facto control deck, I would say right now. The dragons deck that opens with Yulon, Sinestro, Longshin with the nature backline, I would say is the very, very top of that spectrum of a hardcore control deck. It's not a combo deck. It's not a main range deck. It's not an aggro deck. It's a control deck. And so when WizardBeast and I are playing these kind of mid-range decks, historically, control beats the pants off of you, and you have to either go into a combo deck or an aggro deck to beat control. Mm-hmm. So we started brewing something like that. And it actually, yeah, like you said, you and Rodri, thankfully, came on stream and kind of tested out this matchup of dragons versus Belinda, Valera, Samuro, a triple fighter open that looks to just one-shot Longshin, freeze Yulon with the Belinda Elemental, and then you just go ballistic for the rest of the game. And it was actually working way better than I thought. Did you also think that? I think WizardBeast was watching there too. I was really impressed, honestly.
Yeah, it was. I did not expect it to work as well as it did. Like, it was really interesting to see, because, you know, anytime you're doing a triple any opener, right? Like, I've tried triple green, and it can work. Like, I did. There was one that I think was popular on either Asia or China. They popularized, it was Frost Valera, but instead of Varden as the third, it was Eudora as the third. And it looked so weird, but even when you came down to the Frost Valera mirror, it just basically turned into a flip of whoever gets that water elemental in first, sped up with the Valera, just freezes the other Valera, and the game ends. Like, talk about a polarized matchup, but it could work. Like, it was weird seeing that triple green could still work against a bunch of this other stuff. Obviously, that matchup is a weird flip, but like, it was working against other stuff, and I was really surprised. So, like, seeing another triple green opener, you're always a little skeptical when you see an opener like that, but I tried it on ladder once or twice, and the nice thing about it is the bench you were rocking was Shadow Bench, so you got your Natalie and your Vol'jin, and then what was the last one? Thrall, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Thrall's kind of our anti-Sinestra tech, right? Like, that's kind of, as the rise of Sinestra and so many comps now, you need some kind of big red on the bench, like, to adequately deal with her, or you're going to get 2v1'd or 3v1'd, unless you have like a full nature line that can kind of out heal it, or there's some fringe things that can get around it, but like, you need an answer to Sinestra, and it needs to be a lot of burst damage, because she can just heal up and prevent a lot of the damage. But I was really impressed with the comp. Any comp that has more flexible openers like that, like the triple green opener worked well. Like in practice with Rodri, it was really interesting to see, like, so you kill Longshin turn 1, right? They full focus Longshin, and Longshin's kind of what enables you to do your control-y stuff. Like, I've been playing a lot with the dragons. I've been jamming dragons and everything. And I do think that matchup can be improved if they swap their item. Normally the item you see is the one that, you know, when you swap, it gives additional health to all your dragons on top of the unit you swap with. But the other equipment for Longshin, all his equipments are good, but the other one, it lets his swap ability start off cooldown, and you get passive nature resistance. Nature resistance doesn't matter a whole ton on him, but the starting off cooldown is huge, and that's why if you are running into dragons, always check the Longshin item, because that completely changes their turn 1 and the options they have, so you always want to be checking that. We didn't test out that version. I do think if this becomes like a popular anti-comp, you're going to see more of that. But literally, Long Jin gets smacked on turn 1. He's gone. Then with Nature Bench, which is the most popular bench for the dragons right now, if you send in Malf can just die. I think we learned that it's better to focus Yu'lon because Yu'lon is actually a bit bigger of a threat than Malfurion on his own. But literally same thing. You freeze the Yu'lon on turn 1, so he can't blow up one of your fighters, with his big damage. You freeze him on turn 1, and then you just kill him on turn 2 with your 0 speed stuff and your big Samuro, and it just snowballs really hard from there. Like the dragons, I think the control deck analogy is so perfect because, especially if you've played the Dragon Mirror, holy shit. The Dragon Mirror makes
like a nightmare.
It makes my head hurt. Like I played it like 2 or 3 times today and I had to stop because it was fun, but oh my god, I felt like every turn I'm just like, I don't know if I'm making the right decisions. There's so many mind games going on, and whoever kills the other's dragon first is at such a huge advantage. There are times I've seen it where each player will actually get a dragon kill on the same turn, and it'll be like different dragons, so that's pretty cool. like I've seen like Sinestro will go down on one side and then Long Jin will go down on the other side on the same turn, and then that makes for like some really interesting stuff. But like if one of the players loses one of their dragons, usually, I think it's either Sinestro that gets focused or Long Jin usually, because they enable some of the most degenerate stuff with it. If one of them dies and you have your 3 dragons chilling and healthy, it just feels like such a blowout. Like it's slow because you're still healing up and you're still doing your control-y like stuff and swapping around and all that, but like it's just pretty backbreaking. So controlled is such an adequate name or archetype for this, right?
Yeah.
Like because it feels like a control deck. It doesn't have that. It's not racing people down with damage a lot of the time. It's just slow, it's grindy, you're gaining a lot of HP, you're healing up, you're getting those big Sinestro AoEs, you're messing with your opponent's head by swapping stuff around. It's just, it embodies those feelings I get from a control deck. And as a control player, I really love that. Like, it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
I was going to say, like, that one of the cool parts about, or that I just thought of when you were saying that, is like one of the cool parts about control mirrors in Mercenaries, at least like I think this one is probably a better example because the other previous control mirrors historically I would say would be like the MAM mirror maybe, which was just like you would just tie like 90% of the time. But it seems like the dragon mirror, you're not really ever tying, and instead it's unlike Magic and unlike Hearthstone, like proper, like unlike standard and stuff, most control mirrors are kind of both players just jockeying for resources, but just saying like go. You just say like go, 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 go. In Mercenaries, you can't do that. It's a control mirror, but you're clicking buttons nonstop for like a game that's 10 times as long. So like it is actually one of probably the coolest games to have a control mirror in, because I think most people that don't like control mirrors are just like, it's boring, right? You're not doing anything, or you're just like hoping that you have just like, you're just waiting until you have a hand of 5 counter spells or something. But in Mercenaries, it's never like that. You have to make plays every single turn 3 times a turn. And that's cool. That's really sick. The other thing that I wanted to mention really briefly about people that might want to try triple colored openers is, and this deck also similarly kind of follows the same pattern, is that I think one of the big things you have to do if you're playing a triple color opener that's all the same color is you basically have to have 1 or 2 ways that those 3 guys can essentially pretend to be another color in some way. And so in this case, we have the Belinda Elemental that freezes somebody. That essentially acts as like denying a whole color from your opponent, so you get to cover your color bases like that. The other really cool thing that I didn't expect that came up when we were watching this matchup play out is that Samuro suddenly becomes like a true damage colored Merc, where on turn 2 and 3, like he's just hitting for 60. I don't care what your color is, right? He is just actually full clearing you. And so Samuro gets to act as if he's no longer just a green mercenary. He becomes like a triple colored mercenary. And then now all of a sudden your triple colored opener, which should theoretically be vulnerable to all kinds of stuff, doesn't become that anymore. So I think that's a really cool nuance that is prevalent in these kind of monocolored decks or monocolored openers, but just a pretty funky phenomenon, I think, that we see in Mercenaries.
Definitely.
And it's really cool seeing all of those, different openers. I mean, I saw, and I actually kind of helped Sign Times make this. We did a triple green opener with, it was Belinda, Valera, and Zwen. And that one was really cool because you would get just a ton of attack off all of them. Again, Belinda, you get Elemental to freeze right away.
Mm-hmm.
Valera then gives you speed for next turn still, and then it's just a heavy hitting comp.
Yeah,
So
I like
that one
that.
was also really cool.
You have the 2-speed Tiger Lightning too on that's pretty sick.
Yeah, no, I saw the Tiger Lightning, especially against for a little while there was the Eudora Rag Tyrion comp.
Mm-hmm.
So they would summon a cannon and then you would go next turn and then Tiger Lightning, and if you hit those, go for the cannons and try and hit them,
He just gets even bigger. Yep.
Yeah. I know their attack, he could just get huge with all of his attack that he's stealing. So
I definitely like that. That's cool. I mean, we were kind of comparing Xuen to Samuro, so that's actually probably a potentially good comparison. It kind of stinks that you're borrowing some attack from Valera, right? But that's okay.
You can steal it from the Elemental too,
Valera
right?
Yeah, well, at least the good thing of Elemental is you don't really care about the attack too much as long as it can hit for the freeze.
Yeah, as long as it's not really 0, right?
Damage. Yeah,
it doesn't freeze on 0, I believe.
Yeah, it has to deal at least 1 damage.
Yep. Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you definitely don't want to double steal because then you do lose the freeze the next turn if it is still alive. But the cool thing also with Valera is it changes the play because you don't want to steal attack from her twice.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you do, you can actually use ambush a lot more for just a 25 damage to anything. It's still a good amount of damage, and then if it's a blue, 50 burst damage. That's a lot of damage coming out. So even comps like that have been pretty cool. So I've actually been seeing a couple more triple green opener comps recently, which has also been nice instead of just always having a mix. Like I would love to have a day maybe triple reds and they don't get swept by something like just a super tanky comp. Like that would be really cool eventually.
Definitely.
I mean, triple red is probably the worst 3-color. I mean, just because we have so few good protectors, right? So we just have to have more good protectors, and then maybe triple red is actually decent. Yeah,
they just don't have the damage,
we have to keep our eyes open. Yeah, we have to keep our eyes open for like how can you pretend to be another color like that? Like how can you actually kill something that isn't green? But I mean, Local R is probably one of the best protectors we've had recently that is possible to be played in those kind of decks. Maybe just like a Cornelius Local R and some like super funky, really niche third protector could be a part of a deck like that. Who knows?
I mean, maybe next Merc release, they just had Caster and Fighter Legendary, maybe Protector. Time to get another Legendary, so.
Probably think so, right? That would be sick.
That would be sick. Yeah, we're overdue for a Protector Legendary, aren't we? We got Valera, we got Edwin as fighters, we got Belinda, another fighter, finally a caster. So yeah, we haven't gotten a legendary red mercenary yet, huh? That's
I think there were technically a couple more. I think there were maybe on release there were more legendary protectors than anybody else, so that could have been partially reason. Okay. I think there were like one more, or like there were more total protectors. I remember there being a skew towards protectors. I think it was towards legendaries. So, but I think you're probably right. This is probably going to be a protector legendary if I had to guess.
Yeah,
and that would be cool to see what they.
That would be hype.
That is it going to be more, protection? Because some of the, like Cornelius, it's all about protecting your mercs, or Local are full damage. So maybe they might do like a blend or something this time instead of one way or the other.
Yeah, so that'd be really neat to see. One build I've been trying out. This was one. The opener was actually I saw Frankie mention it on his stream, and it is basically it's a double red with Rogers. So it is, what was it? It was Local R, Rogers. Was it Thrall for the last one? I think it was Thrall. I might be misremembering. But it felt like, it seemed weird, right? Like a double red opener just seems kind of, like we don't see too many of those other than GVT, right? Like GVT is fantastic. Still one of the top decks, probably the premier aggro deck, as we've called it before. Just because
Grom Valera Thrall, for those that are for the uninformed, Grom Valera Thrall is the kind of GVT angle, but
yeah. And so trying it out with Rogers, I know you've probably seen this in your Frost Tyrion build. Rogers is just so good right now. Yeah. Like when she came out, it felt like she dropped in the Valera set, and with that, the big things were obviously, GVT was a thing, but before that was kind of figured out, the meta was very caster heavy. And then we had Valera, right? So Rogers didn't have like a ton of game against the field because there weren't any big reds for her to really punish, and the ones that did exist could just focus her down and kill her super quickly. So it's like, she just didn't really, like, I think everyone knew she had good abilities and good potential. It just felt like she really wasn't quite there. There wasn't a slot for her in any of the big comps. Whereas now, I've seen her in a lot of different decks. Like the one I just mentioned, the one Mullahoo's been playing. I've seen Dallas play around with her quite a few times. Like there quite a lot of decks I've seen with Rogers, and I think she's finally kind of starting to make her way into the mainstream of the PvP meta. Like 2 months after she came out or something, which is like it's cool.
And I think there's a couple like very distinct reasons for why that is the case. One of them, like you said, is that she kind of came out around when Valera came out, so everyone was focused on someone else. And Mercenaries has this weird phenomenon in it, right, where unless the community kind of tells you that you should focus on grinding someone, people don't really, right? Like no one said grind Rogers. No one was giving us a good reason to, so no one really bothered to. And like you said, Rogers kind of was lost in a spot as like a caster when casters were really good. If you wanted to play Rogers and have her kind of scaling, then you needed to open with her because that was the only way to start stacking up the attack. But if you're opening with Rogers, now that was really janky. She wasn't really doing that much damage to things, was just getting obliterated. And it really wasn't that good. But it took just time for people to finally level her up to try, finally put coins into her, because she needs a lot of good items, I think I would say. Like you kind of need firing position, fully maxed. You thankfully don't need Master Tactician almost with any points at all. Her second ability is just like the 2-speed single target endurance aura, essentially.
With a
you can
heal.
have that at rank 1 and ship it. Yeah, it's a heal, and so extra points into it is good because it's just a bigger heal, so it's good. But you still need her equipment like all the way leveled up so she gets more attack, and her first ability all the way leveled up. So just like that much of an investment in a game where investment is essentially the entire game. That was hard to get, and until it took me this long to even get there, because I'm only really using Rogers because the Tyrion buff makes her good enough, right? And so we had to find like all these different reasons to actually like give her the right stats, get the right meta for her, and just have people bother to want to try. And not many other Mercs. She's probably the best example of like a really, really good Merc that saw no play because people didn't know what to do with it. I can't think of another Mercenary that's really fit that bill yet.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate.
Yeah. I was thinking Grom, but then he got the buff. And then that's what
Yeah.
it all.
The buff was a little different, right? Like, Illidan was kind of like that, right? Like, Illidan was my first legendary skin, and I tried so freaking hard to make him work, but it just... Pre-buff Illidan was trash. I tried pre-buff Grom, too. Also trash. So it was nice, though, that they finally... Or not finally, but like I was really happy that it might... Arguably, it's a little overtuned with Grom, right? Like, Grom's pretty insane. But I'm kind of happy to see that for, the free legendary, right? Like, we kind of joked about how Grom isn't like a real legendary, right? Because he doesn't have a diamond portrait. Like, so he probably wasn't a legendary initially, but they threw the legendary tag on him because like, hey, free legendary, right? But now, after that buff, he feels pretty legendary. Like, he feels deserving of that status because he's like a core part of one of the best comps in the game, right? Like GVT, maybe it hasn't changed a whole lot. Now we see the kind of GVT with the shadow. I've seen a weird shadow Samuro bench, but the shadow Sinestra bench is the more popular one. And man, it is such a good comp. And I was actually really surprised that version of the deck is really not showing up on like the HS replay stats a lot.
Yeah.
Like GVT Nature is still the predominant GVT deck. And I think that's just because, obviously Nature backline is still really good and probably arguably underplayed right now. But like GVT with the option to go Shadow Valera opener and then have your orcs on the bench to kind of, potentially deal with opposing Sinestras as well as Sinestra of your own. It's just so freaking strong. Like if I'm having a hard time on ladder and I don't know what to play, I'll just jam GVT, because it's just like the lines are relatively straightforward, but they're incredibly powerful, and it gives you that aggro deck feel of I'm just gonna rush my opponent down and try and kill their stuff as fast as possible.
And it has a pretty good matchup into dragons, right? From what I understand, that's like one of the good decks that kind of beats up on dragons in that rock paper scissors, which is part of the reason why it's still seeing play. So that's pretty cool. And again, yeah, like you said, I think Grom is, with that buff that Grom got, it definitely feels more like a 2022 Merc than a 2021 Merc, despite not having nearly as many lines of text. But it feels like what maybe like, right, what it should be. And maybe we'll get more reworks like that for some of these other Mercs. Like what happens when we see a bunch of Gul'dan's numbers pulled down, or a bunch of even Gruul like weirdly getting buffed or something like that. But there's a lot of Mercs that you can kind of rework in the same way. Yeah, get buff all the pirates,
please,
get pirates back in here. Yep. So there's so many Mercs that we could give kind of the Grom treatment to that I think would be a real good thing to see. Because when you look at right now, though we've been saying that there are a lot of decks that we've been seeing, most of them more or less fall into the category of nature bench. And then there's some combo, like pick your poison from like Lokalar, Varden, Jaina, the Dragons, Valera.
Rags popping in for anti-frost tech.
But that's like most of the Mercs that you see in various combinations. And then, like you said, there are like these Vol'jins floating around, some Tyrians, probably more Tyrians than not. I actually really haven't seen this, the Tyrian Rag.
Oh yeah,
Fox deck at all. The
yeah, another one
why
you're
can I
talking
think
about.
of what their name is right now? With the Eudora. I haven't seen any of that. I haven't seen any of the Rag Eudora Tyrian deck at all. But that one looks pretty cool. That looks like one of the most distinct kind of different decks compared to a lot of it. And then there's like Karen Diablo on the bench and Cookie and stuff. And there's
it's still around. Like it's funny. Like if you showed the meta now to people back in Mercenaries launch, or even just after Cookie just came out, and you told them that CDC was going to be one of the least popular benches by far, I don't think anyone would believe you in like that short a time. And it's interesting because I think it presents a kind of double-edged sword kind of problem. Like I think this has been great for the people who are super invested in PvP. Like we are, like it's been really fun to mess around with all these new and different comps and all that stuff, and it's kept the meta a bit more fresh in my opinion. But I've seen, comments on YouTube and other social media and stuff where it's like, hey, I missed a drop or I missed 2 drops, and now I feel like I'm so behind and I can't build something. I feel like I'm missing, at least one core piece of like every build. Like I don't have Lokalar leveled yet or something, and I really need him if I want to, compete against Sinestra or Frost Valera or GVT or some of these other comps, right? And now, you can say, well, he's a rare, and you can farm him up faster than some of the other units and whatnot. But we've talked about this before. Rarity really doesn't mean a whole ton in Mercenaries. Definitely not kind of what it means in other formats like Constructed. Like it feels relatively arbitrary when something is a legendary compared to a rare or an epic. Like Sinestra is a rare, Lokalar is a rare. Those feel like legendary power level, right? Like those have been meta-defining Mercenaries that have absolutely just tilted things on their head. Like, I mean, Sinestra can sometimes just 3v1 CDC. Imagine telling somebody that. Like, imagine telling somebody, hey, in like 2 or 3 months from now, there will be a Mercenary that can literally 3v1 the best bench in the game. Like, that's insane. And so while it's been great for the people who've been able to keep up with it, I do think it can become a little daunting for if someone was enjoying PvP, but they decided to take a break. Maybe they wanted to play some more standard or different game or whatever. And they took some time off, and now, they're coming back. A lot of people actually came back for the Chi-G event, and now you're coming back and you're like, all right, I got some coins for the new Mercenaries and whatnot, but I don't have the resources to play this new cool control dragon build, or this new Localar build, or with Sinestra. It kind of repeats the problem we've talked about before with PvP, where accessibility, right? Like, it feels like if you don't keep up with Mercenaries on every release, your options become much more limited, because the new Mercs are just so powerful compared to a lot of the launch ones, that a lot of these launch characters can't compete, which is why I think we're all hoping for more buffs, because that first buff patch was really fantastic. And even though some of the characters that got buffed don't really still see play, like, people mess with Mutanus for like a week or something and then forgot about him again. But like, so many of the other ones have been irrelevant. I mean, Grom is obviously the standout, but Illidan, Cornelius, like, there were some very significant buffs that really changed a lot of stuff. And I think it would be reasonable to see that kind of stuff again, especially when the power level is being pushed so high by things like Valeera and Localar.
Yeah, for sure. I think, eventually they will have to go back and look at all these starting mercenaries that we got. Like we were saying earlier, Gul'dan, just something of, tuning numbers and ability. There's literally a copy and paste of his ability on Huon now, but it has more text and is just way better overall.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
if they want to have something similar, that's okay. If they want to have it like similar between a protector and a caster, but not at such a different power level. So
Yeah.
they just definitely need to go back to the earlier ones and kind of tune them all up. Not overdo them, but just make them even playing field.
Yeah. I wonder how much of the fact that they didn't touch Gul'dan was like orcs were kind of pretty good, and
They
people
were.
were talking about them. Like, that might have been like, okay, we don't want to buff a part of a tribe that is already like a playable tribe. Like, when you think of the Mercs that they did buff, right? It was Cornelius, Holy was basically unplayable.
Yep.
Jaraxxus, Fel was just unplayable. Demons were unplayable. Illidan was just a standalone Merc by himself. Like, Grom was like an orc, right? That they were buffing, and so maybe that was another reason too, right? Well, they already knew they were going to buff
play in
Grom.
orcs, right? Like,
Yeah, right.
originally.
Yeah, no one cares about him in orcs at all, right? Everyone just wants the orcs that punch people, and they buffed what they buffed were basically, I mean, I guess technically they brought down the Battle Fury speed by a lot, which is a good ability, right? It's Thrall, but sideways instead of in one guy. So that's cool, but I wonder if that could have been a reason why they didn't really bother dealing with Gul'dan when they seem like a really good candidate for like a please buff this guy. But we'll see. And this is also the moment of time where like we're going to have the greatest discrepancy between the Mercs that people started with and the Mercs that came out. Like, any new player now is going to have the full experience with all the new stuff. We just kind of have that largest kind of perception gap, I think, because we saw how weak things were and then immediately got to see how strong things got in 2022. So anybody starting after this, I think, really won't experience that, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, they might a bit, because obviously, if someone's like starting up now, you're still going to open the lesser powered mercenaries, right? Like, I start a new account today. It's kind of, you don't really...
Now you open a Sinestra. Now you just get a Localar and a Sinestra in your first pack, and you're like, okay,
yeah.
sure.
That is the nice thing. The one thing that's great about Rarity is that I do like that a lot of these, it's not just the legendary, right? Like, when Valeera came out, it really, and even after her with Belinda drop is when I feel like we saw the change, right? Like, before that, it felt like the legendary was kind of like the most powerful unit. Like, Valeera was just so far and away stronger than anything else in that drop, and it wasn't even remotely close, that I was kind of worried that was going to be a trend we were seeing, because technically the legendary coins are harder to get or whatever. In actuality, it's not that bad. But it's an idea of, that the legendary is, the powerful character. Like, in, Constructed, you only have one of a legendary because it's such a powerful and unique effect. So I was a little worried, we were going to see decent, rares and epics, but then the legendary was going to reign supreme. Well, that isn't what happened. Like, obviously, Belinda was an incredibly strong legendary, but I think it'd be a fair assessment to say like things like Localar and Sinestra are just as good, if not better, in a lot of scenarios. Like, they've gotten better at releasing batches where the majority of characters are PvP playable, and I think that is doing a lot to make the game a lot more interesting for us compared to we all remember Valyria Winter, right? Like it makes me think of like Eldrazi Winter in Magic, right?
Yeah.
Like it was fine, you know, for the first week or two, and then GVT was discovered. And, you know, looking at the stats and stuff, like GVT was played so much more on NA than pretty much any other server. And I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the reason for that. But like, it was, don't get me wrong, it was still played a lot on the other servers. But like, there was like a notably larger portion from what I saw of GVT on NA compared to like EU or APOC. So I thought that was really interesting. Like maybe the NA players just like their aggro decks, and I think GVT also just lent itself to it's relatively straightforward, right? Like sometimes, you know, you might have more complicated decisions in the mid or late game, but like you just pick something to ram into and you just delete it. Yeah. Like that's the name of the game, and that's why it's still a strong comp right now, because you can do that on turn 1 against something like Sinestra that can't heal or can't protect themselves on turn 1. So it's kind of working versus the Dragons. I've liked the Dragons a lot. I think they're like, we've been hyping Dragons up for a while, right? Like there was a lot of copium 2 releases ago with you know, wanting Rathian to be like a playable character, and I think Rathian isn't bad. He just needs a little bit more support in like the Fel department and stuff. But like he's a pretty decent character. And speaking of that same drop, one other build I do want to mention is Surajak's Orc build. So this is one I've been playing with quite a lot. It's probably one of my favorite kind of unconventional comps right now. And you have a Grom, Saurfang, and Galvangar lead. And so it's really weird, but they all kind of scaling up your orcs is the name of the game, and they can all do it pretty well, and they get big and out of control pretty quickly. And then you have that additional +5 attack passive on Galvangar. You can just deal a lot of damage, like. And the surprising thing is the one thing that comp is a little bit weak to is, you know, against Frost Valyria, a lot of the times due to your slower speeds, you can get snapped on turn 2. But I've found even getting snapped on turn 2 with that comp, I still win against that, I think, more than I lose. Which is just any comp that can get past that initial like back-breaking snap at 2 speed on turn 2, I think there's something legit there. Like I think he had a really great record with it on King of the Hill, and that's what made me want to take it to ladder, and it did not disappoint. The only thing is with Galvangar, he unfortunately has like criminally low HP for a fighter who's like always smacking himself in. So you benefit a lot from the additional buff from Saurfang and also maxing him. Like if he's one of those mercenaries where that extra 5 HP can matter a lot because you need all the HP you can get. And then the nature bench is what he's rocking on the bench there, which again, said before, I think nature bench is kind of criminally underplayed right now. It's still incredibly good. It can beat Sinestra in a 1v3 or a 3v1 rather, because you can just out heal her damage every other turn, and then you can just scale up your nature and kill her. So that's one. But even if you go down to just like Malf v Sinestra, that's a tie. So even if you do lose your other units, you can kind of tie it out. Definitely a lot more of those introduced with Sinestra, but that is I think that generally covers our kind of feelings on the meta and stuff so far. It's really it's definitely not, you know, 100% established. There are definitely comps that are breaking out. I think we expect some things to change, like we said, when Chi-Chi's best item gets unlocked on the 9th with the new bounties. I think we're going to see some new stuff there. But until then, I think that we're just going to see more refinement with some of these comps. I know I really want to test the dragon matchup stuff more, because the dragon matchup I had today was, I think, one of the longest games of Mercenaries that wasn't like a tie or something like that I have ever had. And literally more than half of the game was just 3 dragons fighting 3 dragons and just trying to maneuver and kill one of them. Like it took forever, but
Slog.
it was like really fun too at the same time, like trying to figure out what the opponent's doing and am I making the right play by ramping up versus healing, and the decision making felt very involved. And when you do manage to like kill your opponent's dragon first, it's such a good feeling. The one tip I do want to give people about the dragons matchup, and this is like a back-breaking thing that can lose you the game on turn one if you play it wrong. You do not swing with Sinestra on turn one. You swing with Sinestra on turn one, she gets focused down by Longjin and Yulon, and then she's just dead. She takes, it's not 80 because of the reduction from Yulon, but it's like 70 something plus the Longjin damage is enough to kill her, even maxed. I think even maxed with Cookie maybe. So she just dies if you do that. So you can, I mean, if you think they're not going to go for it or whatever, you might be able to try it, but I generally do not recommend doing that. But we might see this change, right? Like we could see that other item be incorporated so you can swap on turn one, like especially like if the counter build you came up with becomes more popular. I think we will see more being able to swap on turn one to kind of mess up your opponent's strategy so they can't focus that one merc you want them to focus on, or you wanted to focus on turn one. Because it's just such a powerful ability being able to mess up what your opponent is targeting.
And I mean, if it wins the Dragon Mirror, that's a pretty legitimate reason to start that equipment on Longshin. I mean, the bonus health is fine, but being able to do it on turn one, that might be good enough. I think you're probably right. People are probably need to experiment, even with I guess Yulon's nature equipment is probably still not better than the Dragons Take Less Damage one, but
it can be good.
Even that could potentially get some looking at with some of the nature bench, especially now that it's a nature spell, right? Now that change is happening, that's basically the best possible spell school they ever could have made it. And so maybe that equipment is good. Like you said, THMD I think is up at rank 1 on NA right now, playing dragons, but not with the standard bench. I think people could mess around with what like the nature bench could become something else. Like you said, I think he's they're on Localar,
Loc, Rag, Cookie.
Brag, yeah. Stuff like that could be totally cool. I think people could still have room to innovate within dragons and within most of the comps, honestly, right now. We didn't really talk very much about Jaina. Jaina's kind of started to fall by the wayside a little bit. I maybe just haven't seen as much of her recently.
She's still there.
People supposedly say they're okay into dragons, but I am...
Yeah, I don't know.
Not necessarily willing to believe that yet, but
I haven't played that matchup a whole ton. Most of the Frost matchups I've ran into with dragons have been like the Frost Valeera stuff, which can be a little rough because they're so much faster than you and all that. But it's really not that bad. Like I think the counter you came up with probably actually does better than Frost Valeera versus the dragons from what I've seen. It's interesting though.
Yeah. Frost Valeera doesn't even seem like it's that good against true dragons, like the combo Frost Valeera.
Yeah,
but maybe. I mean, if you look at my Hearthstone replay, technically Jaina is still in the top like 3 out of 5 best decks or whatever. So
she's everywhere.
Feels like a little bias. Yeah,
like that's the
she has one of the best equipments in the game. Just can't die on the turn that you're supposed to die. So
and she synergizes with one of the best mercs in the game right now, right? Localar punishing, like scaling up. I mean, even we saw Varden get so much better because of that too. It's like it's not just Valeera making Varden super good right now. It's definitely Localar. Like I've said it before. It feels like if you cut Localar's frost damage and Valeera's speed in half and made them 2 and not 4, those are still like A tier mercenaries.
Yeah, that's probably a healthier meta, I would say. But now dragons maybe starts to look like too scary, right? Like I would say every time we've been like, hey, please nerf this thing, right? Like something has within like a month or something, right? Within like another wave of mercs or people figuring it out or just things changing. The things that people were crying about in terms of like, hey, this is maybe too strong, did kind of get changed. Even literally, I am starting to try to level up my Valeera because Valeera is already starting to live long enough as a villain to become a hero, right? It's like the opposite of that meme of like live long enough to become a hero or die a villain. And at this moment, that's kind of what Mercenaries is. And that's cool. That's a great narrative of like this person is just destroying everybody. Everyone hates them. And then like they get their own redemption arc later just by the way that the meta has been evolving. So I've really liked that. We saw it with Karen Diablo as well, where everybody was like, oh my God, this is broken. We're never going to get rid of this. What's ever going to usurp this backline? And now it's one of the lesser played backlines. So that trend is really positive, I would say, in terms of like the narratives within Mercenaries as we've been moving.
Yeah,
for sure.
I definitely agree with that. And one interesting thing to note about that Dragon comp we mentioned from THMD, they were actually running, at least when I ran into them and got wrecked by it, they were actually running not the damage resistance on Elon, they were actually running the nature buff, which I thought was really interesting because they only have one other nature unit other than
Without a
Elon
nature
to
bench.
benefit. I got eaten alive by that cookie. I didn't realize when I read that. I didn't realize that nature damage is repeated for other dragons. Like I literally just read, oh, you get the taunt, and you get nature damage. I literally stopped reading after that. I didn't realize there was another line of text there, and I'd played the comp like 10 times. And I think it was today on your stream where it was like, holy shit, there's another line of text there. And I was like, that's why this is scaling so much crazier than it seemed on paper, because like it gets out of hand really fast. Like I got cookie sniped for like almost 30 or something. Like it was stupid. But
no, that's great.
It was
because with that equipment, it's +6 per every dragon, correct?
Yeah.
So
every
every
other
dragons,
dragon,
that's 18 then, right?
Yeah. It's
that's a lot.
It's insane. It's like you literally only need like it benefiting itself and benefiting maybe if you throw in cookie off the bench. Like you don't need full nature backline to take advantage of that. Like you can just get away with other stuff like local R and rag, and it works. So that
I wonder
was
if there's
really
a world.
Cool.
You were talking about it today when we ran into somebody and we were like, oh, I wonder what their bench is going to be, and you were like, oh, I wonder if it's Big Stomp, but with an alternate thing. Yulon Big Stomp. Might be a move.
That's
might
gross.
Be a move. I don't know. I'm just saying. I'm just putting that out there. Yulon giving you 18 nature damage, and you bring in a Cairn, and you just go like 60 you, or whatever the heck that is. Like that could be legit.
Insta kill some fighters. Like, geez, that's a cool idea. I always forget. Cairn has those nature synergies because we haven't seen him like in a nature focused comp since like the Big Stomp build. Mm-hmm. It's been a little while, so.
Yeah, I mean, what if it was just literally CDC on the back line of dragons, but you have Big Stomp and you have Big Bleed too? You can just stack damage and go Big Bleed you for 20 or whatever. That might be fine. Maybe you don't even need Diablo. Maybe you just play somebody else and you just have Cairn with Big Stomp. But I mean, it seems like it's probably too good to pass up Endurance Aura plus Big Stomp, or Endurance Aura plus Fire Stomp, other Stomp. But again, just like even just talking just like this, right? We're already starting to come up with like, oh, we could play that equipment. Oh, and that if we play that equipment, then now like this guy gets pretty good. And we started to see this. All of these like machinations only get exponentially more interesting and more complicated with 10 new Mercs, 20 new Mercs. Forget about doubling the roster. Forget about when we reach Pokemon levels of rosters within this game. It's only going to get cooler.
Yeah. And I mean, that is, at least for me, the reason I put in a ton of time and effort grinding up these mercenaries. Like, Alexstrasza was the farthest thing from playable when I finished maxing her. But I wasn't doing it to try her then. I was doing it so when we get some more cool dragons, I don't have to grind a Merc I've already had sitting for a month, 2 months, 3 months. It's already ready to go. I just got to get the new guys up and ready. So, like, that was definitely knowing that more stuff was coming and that, we'd see more synergies like this was definitely a big motivator for me in terms of, like, grinding up characters who I did not consider, like, great or playable at the time. Like, I know you had some success with scabs, but I really, I had no faith in the scabs, but I did them anyway, because at some point there's going to be something silly that makes him or, one of these other characters work. Like we were talking about Rogers,
synergy guy or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Like Rogers is a great example of that. Like she didn't really have a place when she came out, and now she's showing up in a bunch of different stuff, and it seems to be working really well because there are more reds running around than there used to be because of Sinestra. And it's just really interesting watching the meta change, and that's definitely one of my favorite parts of Mercenaries is it definitely doesn't feel like it gets solved super quickly. A lot of these like best decks will still be some of the best decks, but it feels like every new drop there's at least like 1, 2, or like a handful of new things that kind of make their way in as like a new comp, or like it's a new take on an older comp. And it's only going to get better as, we get more stuff, especially if they can keep the quality of releases up, because think we can all agree the Merc releases so far in 2022 have just been substantially improved over like launch and some of the early releases. Looking at you, pirates.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. No, the Merc launch releases have been just amazing this whole year. I think all of the mercenaries too, just the detail of all their skills and everything going into them has also made it so they're a lot more popular, and it's not just, Valera is at the top, she's the one played. I think we've seen out of these new five, four of them have had a substantial play so far. Chi, I think will have a little bit more, but I think the Ox is the only one who hasn't had as much play. I've seen a couple comps, every once in a while I'll have someone run it. And it's kind of cool to have like a bunch of divine shields pop or something. But, it's cool that it's not just one or two mercenaries taking, everything by the storm for like a month or two.
Yeah, I think it's a very welcome change. And as we know, all it takes is one more good beast or something, and the Ox goes from, it's not a bad character, but it doesn't feel like it has like a great home right now. There's some interesting tech there for like anti-localar stuff I've seen a few people messing around with, but it's like I haven't found a spot I've really loved it in yet. But all it takes is, one or two more good beasts or some synergy with what it's doing with those divine shields or protection, and it could become much more meta than it is right now. So really,
I mean, Sanitimes was saying Sanitimes was name drop was hinting at a broken, quote unquote broken Nuzao deck that they were waiting to reveal. And technically, when you go to Hearthstone Replay and you look at win rate across top 10%, minimum 500 games, for some reason Nuzao is top 3. They have a 62% win rate. I don't know who. I don't know how. Maybe it's Sanitimes solo carrying. They have played apparently more than 500 games in Nuzao since then, but I don't know where that stat is coming from, but it's somewhere. So apparently somewhere the cow is going crazy. But
that's cool. I didn't know that. That's I always love seeing Signs comes up with some really interesting like anti-meta comps. Like one of my favorites from him was a no green comp where it was just like frost stuff and healing with like Cornelius and then the nature backline. It was just on paper, you look at it and you're like, how can this work? And then you play it and it's like, wow, this actually works. Like, yeah. I was really surprised. So he's a great deck builder. Actually, definitely looking forward to seeing that. That's the number one.
That's with minimum games of 200. That's the number one win rate deck on Hearthstone Replay, apparently at top 10 of like high elo. It's Localar, Varden, Jaina, and then Nature Bench. No fighters anywhere.
Yeah, I've seen quite a bit of that actually. Cool. The Frost opener with like Locke, Varden, Jaina, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I haven't seen that much of it. That's actually weird. I wonder why.
Yeah, it's not like super duper popular, but it's definitely good. It definitely has some game. But I think that's going to wrap up our general meta discussion. I think we had a good talk about what's going on in the meta, how we're enjoying it so far, and what we're looking forward to with other things that we might see in the near future with some of these like Chi or Ox builds. But we did have some very exciting news today for Mercenaries. Arguably the first real direct communication about the mode we've gotten in like 3 months or something, like around the new year or something, roughly. So for those who don't know, Ben Lee, the like senior game designer person, that's probably not the right title, game director. I'm probably butchering that, but cool dude. He's like, one of the main people running the show on Hearthstone. He actually did a interview over on the Coin Conceit podcast. If you're not familiar with that, it's a great show, kind of focusing on lowering the barrier to entry of competitive Hearthstone and whatnot. They actually did some mercenary stuff early on, like a little Mercenaries League thing that me and Tangster were taking part in. That was a lot of fun little community event. And in this interview, he talks a lot of Hearthstone stuff, but the Mercenaries relevant stuff, he actually, got a question directly about Mercenaries, and we got a bit more of an in-depth answer than I was honestly expecting. I didn't even expect him to get a question about Mercenaries, for being honest. So shout out to them for, getting a question in about this mode that we've been wanting, some answers for a while. And definitely recommend, if you want to see the whole thing, go check out their most recent episode. I'll try and remember to link that down in the description. But we are going to watch through that. It's about a 4-minute clip, and we're just going to see, what he has to say about Mercenaries. So you guys have that up?
I do.
Yep, ready to go.
All right. I will start it on go. So 3, 2, 1, go.
Well, and another mode that I think people have insisted is dead is Mercenaries, which launched with quite a bit of fanfare, and now things have been a bit quiet, although I know there are some dedicated players like Mullahoo TV, and I still am enjoying it personally. But how do you think the launch went, sort of from your side of things, and what do you expect to be the next evolution of the mode? Like, when can players expect to hear about sort of bigger picture changes?
So, I think one of the things with Mercenaries that I can talk about straight away is we haven't unfortunately had the content followed up that we wanted to. And I don't want to delve into this topic a lot, but I'm sure everybody's aware that there's been a lot of turmoil at Blizzard over the last year. We've also been working from home and various other things. And the reality is we've had other things to focus on, and we wanted to make sure that we got this mode out in the hands of our players. And the reality is we just unfortunately haven't been able to deliver as much as we wanted to in terms of post-launch content. We've enacted some plans recently to try and make that to do that in a better, more efficient way. There's some really cool, interesting systems that are coming. One of the big things we wanted to make sure we delivered on as quickly as possible was what to do with your excess coins. We frankly didn't expect players to get so many so fast. Maybe that was naive and foolish, but the way we had thought about Mercenaries was really just something that you can I mentioned this before, something you can play and come back to as and when you want. And during the press, I talked about it a lot like that. Mercenaries is meant to be like, a single player game in that the multiplayer we can talk about in a moment, but for all intents and purposes, our focus was to make this a really fun, interesting single player experience that you can play at your own pace and dip in and out of. And the rate at which people consumed it was incredibly fast. And there were people within the first week that had maxed all of their characters, which, this always happens. There are extremes in fandom and in games, but it happened way more than we were expecting. And, in terms of how we think about Mercenaries and success, during 2021, it really helped us out in a lot of senses. And by that, I mean, again, I'm not afraid to shy away from talking about the business side. Mercenaries did great for us last year and was fantastic and really helped us out. And it's easy for people to talk about money in a negative way, but the reality is, if something's successful in our game, it helps the people making our game, and it helps our game continue to grow and be relevant. If Hearthstone wasn't a financially successful game, we wouldn't get to do all these awesome things and make all these different types of content. So Mercenaries has done really great for us on that front. I think, again, the biggest failing there is just we haven't been able to follow things up as quickly and as efficiently and with the systems that we wanted to. But again, a bunch of that was because players are consuming this. They were consuming this incredibly fast and aggressively. And also, we didn't really expect players to feel they don't need to, but they want to. Like, you don't need to get all the Mercenaries and max them all to complete the content. But many players feel they want to because the characters are cool, or they like collecting and so on and so forth. So in some ways, some things have felt less generous than we intended, because players like, well, I don't have 100% of everything, but the intention was never for you to have that. It was to hopefully be, happy. You can play Mercenaries free to play, be very happy with what you get, and you can have an awesome time. And that was our intention, rather than, you need to invest tons in this and so on and so forth.
Well, we've all been trained by Pokemon to try to catch them all,
That's true.
So, I mean, speaking of like how you consider a success, and you talked about the last time you were on the show that if Hearthstone was on Steam, it would be like...
Okay, and that's the end of the Mercenary segment. Again, if you want to hear the rest of that interview, talks about a lot of cool stuff. Also drops like some kind of big information towards the end. So if you want to hear more about that, definitely go check out the most recent Coin Concede podcast episode. It was really cool to see, an actual, the dude running the show, go on and have kind of that direct interaction with the community. And it was cool to see, you know, some very direct, you know, addressing of Mercenaries and kind of answering some of the questions we've, you know, had for like a while now. I mean, I know Mullahoo here was the one who kind of, you said it, you know, a few episodes ago now, like with these new Mercs releases, it's like pick your starter Pokemon, right? Like it's not realistic to get them all done. And I mean, I've seen that firsthand as someone putting like essentially a full-time effort into it. It is really, really hard to do that. Like I'm trying to do it because I want, you know, as much variety in the content I produce for it. And I think that also presents a challenge in terms of why Mercenaries isn't as represented, especially on like the Twitch scene, as it could be, because, you know, it's just you want variety in your content and whatnot. You know, people don't always want to see the same thing over and over again. But I think it's cool and good that we have different perspectives here, right? Like, because I've put like a bunch of time and a bunch of money into the mode, but like Mullahoo, totally free to play. So we get like, and he's had a great time and great experience with it, and he's had a good time climbing recently with it. So it's like it's very possible to do this stuff without spending a dime, which is awesome. And he said the magic words, right? He said the excess coins, right? That's I'm pretty sure the first time that's been like directly mentioned again in like months. No date or anything like that, or what the supposed fix is. And I do wish we did get like a little bit more talk of PvP there. He like very briefly mentioned it, but obviously, you know, they were working with a limited time frame, you know, for the interview, and they had a lot of different questions they wanted to cover, because obviously they're not a Mercenaries focused show. So I was just happy we got like any mention of that at all. But there's quite a bit to dissect there. I think one of the big things is, and I feel like I said this like near the beginning, was this felt like Hearthstone's answer for a PvE mode, right? Like it felt like that's the kind of the vibe I got from it. But again, we've talked about this disconnect with the community. And I think, you know, you talked about how the content was consumed so rapidly. And if we think about launch content in terms of PvE, I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty sure I had the PvE content beat on normal in like a day or two. And I wasn't rushing it. I wasn't like going super fast and trying to max the most efficient stuff to do it all. Like I was just, you know, I guess playing the game how they intended it. You know, I had some Mercenaries. I opened some cool ones up that I wanted to level, and I was working my way through the content. And it was fun. I think most people had a decent amount of fun just messing around with that. It's just the end of it came rather quickly. And there, as we know to this day, there's still no really end game system there. They've talked about how that's going to be the next major thing that's worked on. But when people finished all the content that rapidly, the only thing left was PvP. And that's not a bad thing necessarily, because I think that's a reason we have such a PvP focused community on the mode, is because, I mean, what else are you going to do? Are you going to, like, there's no incentive once you max out a character to go run some bounties with it, right? Unless you're maybe using it to level another character. There's no reason to, you know, clear 500 bounties with this character and you get this cool skin or something. That doesn't exist for the people who just want to do PvE. There's no real goals you're setting for yourself once you have a character maxed. Whereas in PvP was kind of giving you a reason to max your characters more, because that little stat buff, especially on launch, was so significant in some breakpoints and all that. And to me, that's the reason I think a lot of players really push so much time into leveling their characters as quickly as possible, because they saw all this cool stuff on the PvP side and they wanted a piece of that action. And so they were like, all right, well, but if I'm going to do PvP, I need to get my character skills up. I can't be having a weaker skill than my opponent, right? I want to have the best team I can. So I think that really fed into kind of the the desire to grind all these PvP stuff and grind all these characters. And so it kind of almost unintentionally made PvP the end game and made it more focused on than I think their intentions were. Which is interesting because now, 5 months later from launch, as someone who produces, a bunch of Mercenaries content, the PvP content is what people want. Like, for the Chi event and all that stuff, the PvE guides are great. Like, Old Guardian does a great job with that stuff, and there's definitely an audience for that. But outside of like specific events or like particularly hard bosses, once you know how to do it, you're not revisiting like content like that, or you're not looking for a new way to do it necessarily because it's done. You don't really have a reason to redo it. And it's not like that in PvP, right? Because you can just try a new comp. You have reasons to want to level so many different characters and different combinations to try out new things. So it's like, it's really interesting that PvP was ironically like the lesser focused thing, but it became what the community is kind of focused around.
Yeah, for sure. I think, and that's also what is so surprising to a bunch of people too, talking about in the community, and as Mullahoo's also said, is kind of the perception of people in the community of seeing everything is, having the PvP focus is what people are thinking. If it's all PvP focused game, everyone's going to want that full maxed collection. Everyone's want to go, rush that and get that done as fast as possible. But the PvE, as we saw, was their main focus. So it's not made to have that full collection and get every single comp you can to the best ability that you can play it at. And I think that's where the community's been a little bit disconnected in a way from Blizzard. And I think this is, this was great to have a video that finally had great communication. Like this, they talked about a lot of important things. The full collection, PvE was main focus, excess coins was a big thing, content coming out still. So it's great when we have communication like this, because now we actually know for sure as a community, instead of like assuming something or just, what do we think that they're thinking? We know that, PvE was the focus. They wanted us to just kind of go through that slowly, play around in that, have some fun, maybe take a little break, come back and do more of it. But, as players of Hearthstone and other Blizzard games, people like to dive into it and get it done with and then just play as much as they can. So I think, that's just a little bit of a disconnect between the community and Blizzard.
Yeah, I think that was one of the big things that jumped out to me. And we said it, right? We kind of guessed. We were expecting of like, how does this ever make sense, right? That Mercenaries is kind of in the position or has the problems that it has. One of the clearest answers seemed to be, it surprised Blizzard. They did not expect this. And Ben basically gave us the confirmation to say, like, he admitted it. He was like, we did not expect you guys to go as ballistic as you did with this. And I wonder how much of that was, like I said, it was just last year was just turmoil from start to finish for Blizzard, for everybody who was in there between COVID and all of the lawsuit stuff and working from home. And then there was a big vacation that was around that time too, like right kind of after Mercenaries came out. So there really was that big like winter gap that we didn't really see things. But I'll definitely say that I'm surprised that they were surprised, right? That to me, when I think of Blizzard games, right, one of the things that I kind of tend to say is that like the game begins when the game ends. That when you beat the game, that's when the game starts. For most Blizzard games, that tends to be the case. When you play StarCraft, you beat the campaign, and then now you can actually start to play competitive StarCraft. When you play WoW, you do all the normal stuff. You hit level 60, you hit level 120 or whatever the cap is right now. I don't know. You do all the normal stuff, and then the game begins. Then you start raiding. Then you start doing PvP. Then you start grinding gear. Then you start grinding your faction stuff, right? And so Blizzard games to me are synonymous with a really, 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 really cool and focused endgame. And Mercenaries just straight up did not have one of those. And so I am surprised that they were surprised, but I think you do have to give them some benefit of the doubt with just like how messy last year was, how brand new this game was. I mean, completely unprecedented for a Blizzard perspective. Like Zombies was saying, like this was kind of their PvE attempt, though they did kind of knock it out of the park as far as I'm concerned with the Book of Mercenaries, right? Like, was something that people were really, really, I think, positively responded to. But this game just kind of had, to me, the PvE and the PvP both have two parts to them. There's kind of like an early game and a late game. PvE has all early game, no late game, and PvP has no early game, all late game. And that problem started, like you said, everybody then went, okay, what is the late game here? Is it a PvE endgame? No. It's a PvP endgame? Yes. Okay, well, I guess I'm focusing on PvP. What do I have to do in order to get to PvP? Is there an early game for PvP? No. The only way to do it is go and grind 1.1. So that disconnect of like both sides of the game missing a critical part of themselves that happened to overlap with the other side of the game mode, I think did create this really bizarre environment where if you wanted a PvE, there was no payoff. And if you want to PvP, you have to do something unsavory, I would say. So definitely very, very odd. But great to know that they are, like you said, looking at it. They know what's up. They said sorry, but also the fact, kind of the thing we didn't really mention was like, this made them a ton of money. I think we were kind of realizing that from the beginning. Like, I would not be surprised that they were equally surprised by how much money was just funneled into this game from people. Obviously not undone. It's not like they released it half baked to just like debate people into buying packs or whatever. Like, obviously not. But the fact that it made a lot of money is, at the end of the day, only a good thing for the game mode. If the people at the top of Blizzard look at Mercenaries and see a big green number, you want to put more resources into it. You want to make it better. You want to make more people play it. And so to me, I honestly took that as a great sign that it made them a lot of money, more than they expected. And as long as they keep working on it, that should continue to uphold.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the good things too about this is they got a Mercenaries team really fast. What was it, 2 months after the mode came out, and they already announced that they're starting to have the Mercenaries team form over the winter break. So that could have been a factor in it. They were just shocked at all the profit that came in, and then they're like, well, let's put a lot more resources into the mode. So
yeah,
that could have actually been a great thing for the mode a long time. Just going over, this whole year, maybe the next one, having a dedicated team to give us more and more content. And even as he said, which they have been giving us content as in new mercenaries in this event really, really fast.
Yeah.
And they're saying that wasn't up to the standard even that for what they want. They wanted content to be, a little bit more or maybe even faster. Because he said they weren't on the right track, but they have plans now to get back onto it. So I wonder what, in this next few months, how is it going to look out with more content release and everything coming, and especially new systems?
Yeah,
systems we need.
I really hope that definitely, that's alluding to the fact that the biggest thing, the extra coins thing has taken so long. I think maybe between that and, because we have, like you said, we've been getting regular content in terms of the Mercs drops, but as we've talked about and the community has discussed, those don't feel that great when the issues that have been prevalent since launch are not being remedied. And I think, he even says that there's kind of a feeling that from players that they haven't really been as generous as they'd like to be with this mode. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that they haven't been able to kind of meet those standards that they want in terms of content output for the mode. I think we also theorized that a lot of Mercenaries were made in the beginning and they've been slowly rolling them out. But as we've seen these new ones, and just the stark difference in kind of depth of design and how a lot of them are actually, seem PvP focused, it wouldn't actually surprise me if a lot of the work they've been doing has been on these new characters. I initially thought, they probably designed another 50 Mercenaries before launch. And so that way they have, that I mean, it's a typical thing to do in these kind of live service games, right? Where if you're going to launch something where you want to have monthly releases, monthly is really fast compared to standard Hearthstone, right? In standard, you have a expansion every 4 months and you have a mini set in between that, right? And you get some balance changes in between there, but that's content every 2 months then, right? And it's only big content, 3 times a year. Well, we're getting drops, 12 times a year. And so it's really interesting to actually hear Ben talk about it like that. And definitely, if there's anything that gave me a little bit of hopium here, it is that they acknowledge and straight up said, like, hey, we want to be putting much more content out for this. I just hope that means, more of the stuff that the communities wanted rather than just like, hey, here's more mercs. Because obviously just throwing more mercs at the mode, while improves some things, it doesn't fix the core issues that it's rooted in. And one other thing I did want to mention is, and this goes back to player expectations and whatnot, I think they made a very, very large mistake ever dropping the name Slay the Spire. Because for anyone who does not know that game, it's a really awesome roguelike. And the thing with it is that game has literally like hundreds of hours of replayability in terms of PvE content. It's a deck building game. It's like different every time, but there's like challenge and interesting decision making and all that stuff. And I don't even think they really meant to give us that kind of like expectation, but it did happen at some point, like, I don't know, a few months before launch or something. Someone name dropped Slay the Spire, and when the first picture we saw of the Mercenaries bounty board, in a lot of ways it looks kind of similar to like a map in Slay the Spire where you're working your way up and stuff. So I think it really set the expectation that the PvE was going to be this really deep kind of infinite replayability or very high replayability. And then when people got it, not only was, the depth of decision making not super involved, like, yeah, maybe Red and Black Hand and some of the Black Rock Mountain ones were a little bit tricky, but at first, but like most of the PvE wasn't super duper hard, and you could beat it in like a day, 2 days, or maybe if you're taking it really casually, like a week or something. And then maybe you can do heroics if you want a little bit more of a challenge, but after that, you're kind of done. Unless you're, farming for coins for like PvP to max out your guys, or just doing it for the sake of, completionist, there's not really a point to do that anymore. And as we've seen, at first the players did Air Elemental because that was just the fastest way to get strangers and farm your guys up to get those task 7s for PvP. Then that got nerfed, and people started doing Bane Hollow instead. Same kind of thing of doing lower level content just to get as fast as possible. And now we all know the regular strategy for once you finish all your task 18s for a mercenary, you're just throwing them in 1-1 because you don't have to gamble on coins. You don't have to do a 5 to 10 minute bounty only to find out you got coins for the mercenaries you weren't looking for. And it's even worse if you already have a bunch maxed, because then you can get coins that are totally useless, when instead you could just run low level content, not have to pay attention, and you're guaranteed a set amount of the coins you want every 2 to 3 minutes or something. So that's something I really hope they can remedy in kind of the new content, the PvE endgame, that kind of stuff. I think there just really needs to be give us a reason to do the challenging content, because it can be fun. Like I think we've seen with the new Alterac Valley bounties and even some of the later Blackrock ones, they made it harder. Just getting to the bosses, you have to think a little bit more, and you can't just mindlessly click, or sometimes you get punished for it. So I think that is a good direction to go in, but you need to make the player feel adequately rewarded, because those take more time and more effort, and it doesn't feel like there's more reward. In most cases, it feels like there's less, and that's just like a disconnect in the
Feels
experience. Bad. Yeah.
I mean, they started to, right? Like they gave us, I think no matter what, you look at everything they've done in 2022 and said like, okay, that's a good start. That's a good step. And I think the good step so far is the heroic equipment, right? Like actually forcing you to do the heroic PvE content to get gear. Good. Great. Very WoW-esque, right? You got to go do your stupid raid to go get your piece of gear. And then you can, thankfully here, it's not like you have to go, it got rid of the feels bad part about raiding, which is you go and do a hard boss and then your piece of gear doesn't drop. But now you always get your piece of gear. The bummer is that you kind of never have to do it again. And I think that's what we kind of are continuing to almost dance around in a certain sense. And we started talking about a potential solution, and maybe I know we're going to try to talk about it as like our closing question and stuff, but it seems like what we're all really trying to get is a PvE that you want to play multiple times. We want the modern content to actually incentivize you to do it over and over again and want to, right? Not because you have to. We're doing 1.1 because we have to, not because we want to. We're not doing the heroics because they don't give us anything. We would love to do them. A reason to do the new content and have it be worth our time is all that the player base is asking for. Whether or not it's actually a whole brand new mode or a whole brand new system, I mean, that'd be great. But at the moment, literally players are just looking at the game, doing the math and realizing the new content isn't worth my time. And in a game that really, really, really demands a ton of time from you, why would anybody ever make that play, right? And so there are just things to fix. There are things to tweak. They've started moving out direction. Like WizardBeast was saying, the brand new team just for Mercenaries is great. Everything in 2022 has been a banger. Chi event was pretty good. That was another good example of like, make the new content funky, make the PvE content funky. In this case, it was partially maybe too difficult for new players. And so then that starts to be an issue of like, which player base do you cater to? Because if it's too easy, the established players don't care. And if it's too hard, the new players can't do it ever. And is that really going to bait people into leveling up their Mukla so they can finish finish a Chi event? Probably not, because that quest gave you 50 Chi coins and 25 Schwen coins, right? Like at the end of the day, that is as well just really isn't enough of an incentive to do the content. The event is cool. The difficulty was interesting, but we need finite rewards and just finite fun per second of playing the PvE.
Yeah, definitely agree with all that. It's it just feels like there's too many random elements in play right now.
And in a bad way.
Yeah, not in a fun way.
Yeah.
Not in the random is fun way. The random is screwing me way, which we know how polarizing that the opinions and feelings can be around that. Like, you know, there's a thing in human psychology, right, where if you have one really bad experience, on average, it takes about 5 really positive experiences to kind of balance that out in terms of feelings. So it's like when Mercenaries is kind of piling on and it's almost ironic, right? Like I think a lot of people, even the people who don't really PvP, but who have been attracted to the mode, they have that feeling of, I want to collect them all, that Pokemon feeling of, I want to just do it all. And it's not even some people don't even do it for PvP. They're just doing it because they like the characters and they just want to do them all. Like they just want to have them all so they can, you know, use whatever they want. And there's definitely like a collecting aspect to it. And I don't think they really anticipated that, but there is a much bigger kind of casual audience for that than I think they expected. And I think there's a bigger audience for that than like we would have expected, you know, being a bigger part of the PvP focus stuff, which is interesting. And hopefully they're going to, you know, learn from that and lean into that. And, you know, Mercenaries, I like to call it like, this is really kind of like alpha beta level. Like, yeah, they didn't slap the beta tag on it, probably because, you know, you're asking people to cough up $30, $50+ pre-orders, you know, for a beta, that can be a little bit of a hard sell. And I do really wish that we got to try the mode before, you know, asking for those things. Because as someone who was turned off by the reveal, after I got into it and I was really enjoying it, I was like, damn, I wish I could have actually gotten this pre-order thing because I want a Diamond Diablo and I didn't realize how freaking rare diamonds were going to be. And so, but there was no option to get that post-launch. So that was one thing that I think was a little bit unfortunate. And I think it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way because I think a lot of people bought into Mercenaries expecting it to be much more than it was. And a lot of those people felt kind of burned, and it's going to be rather difficult to get them back, even though they've already invested quite a lot of money into the mode, in some cases up to like, what, $120, $130 if you already got all the pre-orders on launch. And I know there are a fair amount of people who did that and did not last in the mode more than a week, or maybe when the air elemental nerf got hit, because they were like, hey, I want to do this PvP really, really badly, but it's already incredibly time consuming. And now they're saying, hey, you're doing it too fast. We're going to make it more time consuming. And that just, I know at least like 5 or 10 people who that was it. That was their, they weren't happy with the grind, but they were willing to put up with it to have fun in the PvP. And that just kind of broke them. Like, because it wasn't Air Elemental, for anyone who wasn't around during it, you got strangers faster. It was not a like fast grinding process. It was slightly faster than like Bane Hollow and stuff, but like it wasn't like it was like 3-4 times the speed or something. Like, so I think they definitely, I think that was kind of, they did that in response to being like, people are finishing this faster than we expected. Because clearly they just didn't expect the interest that was coming from this. So I think there was a lot of kind of miscommunication and mismanaging of expectations, both to the players and like internally of, when they were developing the game, what they thought it was going to be or what it was meant to be, and then what people actually wanted it to be once they actually got their hands on it. And I think that's something that, just because PvE was the intention, it doesn't mean it has to be the only intention, right? Like I think they're eventually, I know they're working on PvE as the next thing, but I think eventually, hopefully, we will see something to throw PvP players a bone, because I think they've got to realize that there is something really great here that people want to do. It's not accessible to them. And if they made it accessible to them, they would bring a lot more players, and with them, a lot more money into the mode. And yeah, it's, good for the company, good for the business, good for the game. So I could definitely see in the future them trying to find a better balance to where, like Mullahoo said earlier, like you're not forced into the PvE if you want to just mess around with some PvP stuff. Like give the entry level to PvP. And we've talked about solutions to that before, so we won't dive super into that. But, rental systems, temporarily available characters weekly like MOBAs do. There's a long list of different things you can do. Letting someone borrow, your comp in just a friendly match. But there's also one thing that really still confuses me, and I hope we can see changed, is something else he talked about in the overall interview was how Hearthstone has changed and improved a lot over time. And he mentioned, duplicate protection, mentioned the rewards track, and then the improvements they made after, the community wasn't super happy with it initially. And it as someone who's played since 2014, the game is in a very different state than it was back then. And that's not even talking about, card design or anything like that. It's purely, what you get out of your packs and what you get for playing the game. It has improved in a lot of ways, but I think there's a really big disconnect there with Mercenaries, because it feels like they unlearned all those lessons or just kind of forgot them or forgot to include them, and they're starting from square one. And when people have been established, or like, people have a higher bar of what they expect from the game, because the game has evolved and there's been competition, which is a big part of why it's evolved. So it's like when I can't even add my most recent player to my friends list to say like, hey, good game, or hey, I liked your comp or something. Like the fact that something that simple is not available when, it's a core feature of regular Hearthstone is kind of baffling. Like, why are we limited to 9 deck slots? 9 deck slots is incredibly prohibitive, in my opinion. Like, and that's something, again, boom, improved it over time. There's no reason, like the technology's literally in the game. Like, we aren't reinventing the wheel here, right? Like, duplicate protection's probably a little bit more of a controversial thing in terms of like business and stuff, but at the very least they could have done duplicate protection on something more cosmetic focused like portraits, because people are going to spend money on portraits anyway. Like, those are the people, that are going to be your whales, or the people who are enjoying the game more, where they're like, hey, I'll throw out a couple bucks to try and get, this fancy skin that I want. And the system just feels so bad right now that, like, as someone in that boat, I feel punished for doing that, which is why I refuse to buy any kind of like regular packs on their own unless it's like with gold for a new release or something, because it just doesn't feel good right now, and it feels like we're back in 2014 Hearthstone when we know how good and better Hearthstone can be in 2022. It's 8 years, right? That's a long time. That's a lot of improvements, and there's no real reason or reasonable justification to me why those features can't be implemented or weren't implemented on launch, because like feels like you have to go out of your way to not implement them, right? Because they're in the game, like they're literally in the game.
I mean, it's just a time and resources. Like like Ben was saying, right? Like they clearly wish that they could have done more and were squeezed. So I think they just had to say like, all right, what things are we going to prioritize? And we have no idea how big the team was too. I would love to see some like get that. Like if it was like 3 people made Mercenaries, which is not impossible to kind of imagine, at least from like a design perspective. Things like that, I think the valid excuse is didn't have the time, didn't have the money, didn't know how good it would be, didn't know what it was supposed to be. Like Ben, literally, they didn't expect people to consume it in the way that it was consumed, right? So if they were even kind of off the wrong page on that, I think it makes sense, or just at least goes to stand that they just didn't have enough time. But all that means to me, I think you are ultimately valid in saying, okay, but so when is it coming though, right? Like, so I can understand not getting it right away, and that's totally fine. Shit happens, takes a while to get in, implementation, blah, blah, blah. Or you just wanted to rip it so that you could then start fixing things. But there is ultimately, I would say, no excuse for it never showing up, right? It is just, it should be a matter of when, and so we wait.
Yeah, and
the Eternal Mercenaries position.
Communication would help with that, right? And this was a good bit of communication, but definitely more regular ideas on. I think part of the huge frustration right now is, you know, we finally at least heard something about excess coins, right? Like the boogeyman was mentioned, but we don't know when that's happening, right? Like it's been 5 months, it could be another 5 months. And
were you gonna say WizardBeast?
Yeah, the one thing is, you know, with the coins, as you were talking about the excess coins, he did at least mention it and said that is a focus of theirs. You know, they're aware of it, and it's going to be coming. We just, as you were saying, we don't know when. So I think, you know, between the coins and also I'm hoping packs do get a change. Like you said, duplicate protection would be nice. But I'm gonna do my 1 pack opening for the podcast and just see what I get.
Oh yeah,
oh yes, on EU.
Yeah, so I'm gonna
okay.
open it up real quick.
Hype.
And okay, let's see what I get. Wow, okay. Epic Portrait.
Okay, we take those.
Ooh, nice.
Yep, we take that. Yep, that's my 1 pack for the week. Epic Portrait.
And what was it?
Varian, it's his, I think it's his 2nd skin.
What is up with Varian skins, man?
I actually
what
have
is
all
up
of
with
them
Varian
now.
skins. Yeah,
Yeah,
on your
all
free-to-play account, you have every single epic Varian skin. I swear to God, that guy in particular has a better odds of opening skins than anybody else.
No, this one isn't on the free-to-play. This is on my main.
Oh,
Just
okay.
log in real quick.
Gotcha. Still,
actually, that's funny you say that, because I actually was doing the same thing yesterday. We were like, all right, packs are terrible. Let's just see what happens when I was trying to max out my local. I was like, I'm just going to buy a pack with gold and see if it sucks. I'm going to stop buying packs when I open a pack and realize this was all bad. I didn't like a single one of these. These were all useless to me. And it took me like 4 packs. Like I opened one and it had some skins. I opened one, it had local art coins. I opened one, it had like another skin and like some Sinestro coins. And then I got a pack that completely bricked and I stopped there. But that could have been worse, but I had that kind of like open one and see how it goes. I think can satisfy some of the pack opening feels, because it does feel good, right? Like you get the packs from the tasks and stuff, and then I'm not going to sit on 1 pack. I'm just going to open it. So it feels pretty good. And honestly, you only really need, I would say, how many packs would you guys say people should save for when new Mercenaries come out, right? Like, because I think that's something that ideally is solved instead with excess coins, where you kind of like save up your excess coins for when new Mercenaries come out, kind of like saving up your dust in that way, where like you don't want to save up your gold. Like it sucks right now that we have to save up our gold a universal Hearthstone resource just for mercenaries, right?
Yeah.
Like in standard, you have dust. You can work on an alternate resource for when the new mercs come out. But how much gold would you guys say, if you're free to playing it or whatever, what should you save up for a new release?
At least 20 to 30 packs, and
Yeah.
that's like average. I've seen, like, last release took me 37. I've talked to a few people who've been in the 40 or even mid to high 50 ranges. I think that's a little unlucky, but it happens. It's a real possibility. So, but if you want to do more safe estimate, I'd recommend like 20 to 30 if you can swing it. Month between releases, I think it's possible, but obviously it's something, like you said, universal Hearthstone currency. If you're trying to play, standard, or if you're trying to play, arena or heroic duels or whatever, there are other things you want to be spending your gold on. And if you're not devoting it all to mercenaries because you're maining mercenaries, I imagine it's rather hard to keep up without actually putting in money. And even if you do put in money, if you do have a relatively progressed collection, you'll get the new mercenaries, but you might not get like hardly any coins. Like literally 40 some odd packs or something, 0 rare coins for either of the new rare mercenaries for me. And that was just mind blowing to me. Like they're rares, like, but instead I got, a couple thousand for coins for rares that I already have, thousands of coins for.
Legendaries you already have.
And literally I was looking at cookie today. I have enough excess cookie coins to max another cookie.
Wow.
Like it's just, and I could do it on BrewCon like 5 times over or something. Like it's silly, but we've talked about that before. So I think we're going to try and wrap things up here. We do have our end question for today. We talked a lot about PvE stuff. So our end question here is going to be, we know the PvE endgame was mentioned as kind of the next major thing to work on a little while ago. What do we each want to see for like a PvE endgame in Mercs? So we talked a little bit before the show about this. One thing I would be really keen on is, I guess there are 2 kind of ideas here. One, some kind of endless mode with better rewards. So you could implement some kind of procedurally generated type of stuff where it takes bounties that already exist, scales them up to like level 30, and then it's like a dungeon, right? Like you go through, you beat the boss, and then you go down to level 2. It's like kind of like Rifts in Diablo, for anyone familiar with that, where you keep pushing until you get to a spot where you can't make it any further. But because it was so hard and you put in so much effort into doing this, the rewards are really great, and you get, like, let's say a choice at what you're getting, and it's a much larger stack of coins than the pitiful 10, 15 coins you get for a character from doing a bounty. Maybe it's like 100 coins or something. The number doesn't really matter as long as it's more of a significant reward and less random generated. And then the other idea I had was, and this kind of comes from games like Slay the Spire, a daily or a weekly challenge, kind of like, Tavern Brawl, right? But if there was like a PvE challenge where everyone had this same challenge and there was maybe like a little leaderboard for it, like, hey, I completed this the fastest, or I did the most damage on this run, something to make the people who enjoy the PvE have a way to kind of compete with each other. And you don't even need to necessarily design a ton of new content for this. You could even get away with like modifying older content and repurposing it in a lot of ways, as that's how a lot of these games kind of do it. So those are really the 2 big changes I would like to see in terms of PvE stuff, and I think they would make the experience a lot more fun and a lot more rewarding for players.
What do you think, WizardBeast? Yeah.
The main thing I want is to have something change with rewards, as kind of you were saying, Zombies. I think having a incentive to play the PvE, even if the PvE is good, if the rewards aren't good, you might play it a couple times and have fun. Like these new bounties that they've been doing for Alterac Valley, I've really liked them. I've been loving the designs. They're a lot harder. The boss fights, they're pretty cool. They got a lot of new designs and mechanics in it. But the rewards still, it's the same as all of the other ones. So something as, maybe it's a finite amount of coins that you can get, and you can like select, like say, you bring your party of 6, you get to the end and it's like, okay, you get 200 coins. who do you want to give them to, or you have to split it in like things of 50. Something where it's that where you know what you're going to get, your exact reward for the time that you're going to put into it. You know, if I'm going to put 30 minutes into this hard bounty, I know I'm going to get a guaranteed 200 coins or something. So I would love to see a change on the rewards for the bounties the most. I think that would be something that would overall help it. Because, you know, if the bounties are, if it's just another zone, more bounties and stuff, and like I feel like I said, Alderac Valley's been great, but the rewards I think determines if people are going to play them or just go back to 1-1 grinding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I think I echo parts of both of what you guys say for sure. I'm kind of gonna just, I'll bring back in the other PvE endgame possibility that we talked about that is kind of the only different final version, because I really like, I think the endless mode, like the greater rifts, Mythic Plus, right? Mythic Plus is literally a part of WoW where it's just like, okay, we take a normal fight, you make it harder, and then you have like 20 something levels of it, and the sicker you are, the deeper you can go, and then you get better and better rewards. Then it's, in some cases it's weekly or it resets every whatever. Like they haven't really done anything like that. Like WoW would be like your raid, you can do it once a week. When do you do it? Do you pug it? Do you do it on your other account? Like now all of a sudden, now there's a real incentive to have multiple accounts, right? Like if I can do the Mythic Plus Mercenaries fight once a week, I'll go do it on my, and the rewards, like you said, WizardBeast, are substantial and like actually worth it. I'll go do it on my EU account. I'll go do it on my APAC account. I'll go do it on my NA account because I can only do it once a week. And that's totally fine. If the rewards are legit, then that's great. So I think the last version of something like this that I would consider for a PvE endgame would be the puzzle mode, right? That we talked about. That's kind of like the challenge mode. That's probably where it would slot in, like Zombies was saying, where it's just here is like a really particularly difficult situation or a series of like back to back situations that you don't even get to choose who you play with in many cases, right? So like it's either like a forced scenario that you have to solve like on the spot. And that also, now all of a sudden you get exposure to other mercs. If you don't know all of them, now you have to like learn them or figure them out, or you get to see them. If you do know all of them, now you have an advantage. You know what some of the synergies are. You can look for those. Something like a drafting mechanic, right? Where you go through and you play an arena where you discover between 3 mercs, which one do you want? Discover again, which one do you want? Discover again, which one do you want? Do that 6 times and then run an event with that. And you have rewards for that. So I think something like a kind of, you don't have full decision over why you're playing with these certain mercs. You just have to deal with it. You just have to solve the situation that's in front of you, because I think that's a fundamental part of the PvP experience that isn't really there in the PvE experience, right? Like you never really look at a PvE fight and just hands in your head and just like, oh my God, like what? I've never been in this position before. I have no idea what my opponent's going to do. I have no idea if this is going to work. Am I getting them in the speed tie? Like that just doesn't happen in PvE. And so the heroics start to do that. The Chi event started to do that, but PvP, you really get that experience. And I think that experience personally is a really, really fun and rewarding one. So a puzzle mode that kind of forces you to put your head in your hands, I think that would be a great kind of PvE endgame, yet again, with a distinct knowing how many coins you are getting from this and you get a choice. All those things put together, I think would be a good spot.
For sure.
Definitely agree. Yeah. So we got some good ideas there. Hopefully, someone out there from Blizzard's listening, taking in that feedback, because I think there's,
maybe we'll get our own interview with some Blizzard
someday,
RDM
right?
at some point.
Fingers crossed. You know, that would be. I would love to even just getting to talk about the. I'd love to hear what it was like beforehand. You know, pre-launch. You know how things changed. Just what the process was of like making the mode, all that stuff could be super interesting to talk about, as well as, you know, like future aspirations and goals for it. So maybe one day, definitely hopeful on that one. But I think that is going to be wrapping it up for episode 12 here. Before we get going, do you want to let our lovely viewers know where we can find everybody here? You want to go first, Mullahoo?
Sure, yeah. Been hopping back into, especially now that like the month reset for March, streaming more like focused PvP on like ladder stuff. So twitch.tv/Mullahoo, and then MullahootTV on Twitter will be where you find me, talking about mostly mercenary stuff, posting sweet stuff, basically everything that we've talked about here today, variants of and questions and answers of, you'll be able to find on both of those spots. And at esports.gg, all the guides and articles and stuff go up on there. So definitely take a peek at those if you haven't seen those.
Yeah, those are great. Definitely, if you're looking for some information on, what you want to focus on these new mercs, where you want to go for them, definitely recommend checking out those articles. All those links will be in the description. What about you, WizardBeast? Where can we find you?
You guys can find me all on Twitch at twitch.tv/WizardBeastOP, and then also on Twitter at WizardBeastOP. And this upcoming week, I'm going to start, or I have just started, a full free-to-play account on APAC. So I'm going to start streaming that coming up this week. Just kind of seeing, people who are hopping into Mercenaries right now, what is it like for them? And I'm just going to go all free-to-play, not even $1 on that one. So it'll be cool to experiment and see how that goes.
Godspeed. I've definitely had an idea to do something like that before, and maybe in the future, but in the for the sake of my mental health, don't think that can be managed right now after the amount of grinding I've done to almost get a full max collection. But as always, you can find podcast here on my YouTube, Zombies Go Nom Nom. Also going to be trying to stream more in March as well. Zombies with a Z, Zombies Go Nom Nom on Twitch. Over there, Twitter, same thing as the YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, a like really goes a long way, helps the video, all that good algorithm stuff out. Subscribe if you want to see more of it. If you're listening on a podcast platform, really appreciate a follow if you're enjoying it. But thanks so much, everyone, for listening. It's a lot of fun. Always enjoy getting to talk mercenary stuff, and we're going to be hopefully maybe having another cool guest on for next week's show. So look forward to that. But that's going to be it for episode 12 of The Fighting Pit. Signing off. Take it easy, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.